In this session, we're going to work with the technology of belief. And to do that, we'll start with a metaphor. And the metaphor is the most graceful geometric shape that we know, the sphere. And it's graceful, it's beautiful because it's both the totality of all that is, but it's also refractable into an infinite number of dots and lines. And so the sphere embodies the masculine and feminine principle. It's the one, it's infinite, it's beyond language, but it's also divisible by an infinite number of dots or lines, the masculine expression. And so the thing to understand about human consciousness is that it exists within a model of reality. So here's the one. And if all you have is one word, one thought, one awareness, you have no human consciousness. You are in the unconscious. In order to become conscious, you have to refract the one into a system. And so we take the one and we divide it into three. We say it's not just one, it's heart, mind, body. Okay, now we've got three distinctions, and we become aware through language and distinction. We say, okay, what am I thinking? Now, in reality, this is the illusion of human consciousness. In reality, you cannot think a thought without feeling. One, because feelings motivate all energy, all human consciousness. So if there's no feeling, there's no movement. And to think something is to move something. What motivated by what? By the desire to feel better and to avoid feeling worse. So that whole motivation thing doesn't happen. Without a feeling, there's no action. So you cannot truthfully separate anything from anything. Because if you follow the threads long enough, you get back to the original source. I mean, our narrative in science is that, there's this little dot of energy, and then poof, 24 billion years later, we have the multiverse. And so if you follow each line of life, matter, energy, gases, if you follow all the different branches and all the choices and sub-branches of everything that has ever existed, it all gets back to that little dot that we call the Big Bang. And there have been many renditions of this paradigm of coming back to the one. But if you look at a tree and you say this is a leaf, you cannot truthfully say that the leaf is separate from the branch that sprouted the leaf, or that the branch is separate from the trunk, or the trunk is separate from the ground that grew it, or the ground is separate from the planet, or the planet is separate. It all goes back to the one. And that's the feminine principle. The masculine principle is to create human consciousness by cutting things up into bits, to cut the one into bits, and then combine those bits in an infinite number of ways to create infinity. So you have the one, you have infinity, and the space in between, the masculine and feminine dance. Now, the reality is that both the one and the many, both the masculine principle and the feminine principle, are unconscious in their extremes. Complete oneness, now you're a fish in water if you don't know it, because it's just, there's no distinction. Or you cut it up into all these little bits, and then you lose track of them. There's too many bits. I mean, try and relate to your life at an atomic level. I'm going to arrange 250 billion atoms in this finger. Let's move all those billions of atoms. We're never dealing with reality. We're dealing with a model of reality. So beliefs are part of the model They're part of the language-based model of reality. They allow us to deal with reality through beliefs. And beliefs just simplify things. They're not real. They're not true. They're not false. They are a model for dealing with truths and falsehoods and reality. So if beliefs aren't real, if they're not true, if they're not false, why use them? Well, we need a model of reality. You can think of it like the Google Street Map scenario. Now, what's reality? As you walk along the street, there's 248 leaves. There's 256 million atoms in each leaf. There's 400, there's this great blade of grass is getting a little bit more light than this blade of grass, and so it's moving. That's reality. That's a street. But we can't drive and keep track of all that. And so we invent what? Google Maps. And Google Maps takes all of that chaos and it divides it into a nice little grid. And it gives nice little numbers. In a sense, we're cutting the world up into manageable bites. And we're saying, here's a little bite, turn left here. And you don't have to say turn left at the 388 millionth atom at the shade of light. No. Just, we'll give it a symbol. A nice little lane, Maple Lane. Turn right at Maple Lane. After Birch Tree Road, go to Maple Lane. So simple, right? It's not real, but it's useful. It's not real, but it's useful. And it's useful because it's at enough complexity to be able to get you where you want to go. That's key, because we could get very basic and say, go to San Francisco, we'll meet there. It's not very useful, right? It's not nuanced enough. But go to the 388th millionth atom, and turn left when the shade of light, and past the grass that's growing 2% faster than the other blade of grass. That's not useful because it's too detailed. And so if we understand that human consciousness relates to reality as part of reality through an illusionary model that's good enough to be useful, that's good enough to elevate consciousness, to create consciousness, but not too good. It's not good enough to be overwhelming. Because, the really great TV screen isn't 248 pixels an inch. It isn't 480. It's not 720. It's not 1080. It's not 4K. The really good TV screen is reality itself at 200 trillion bits of energy per square inch. It's just we can't keep track. At about the 4K point, they're now inventing 8K TVs that basically recreate reality at 8,000 pixels, not 4,000 pixels, right? 4,000 isn't real enough, right? We need 8,000. Well, the human eye can barely, first of all, there isn't a lot of content that produces at that level. And then secondly, we don't really notice that much of a difference. We notice going from 240 pixels per square inch, little dots and squares, to 480. We notice going from 480 to 1080, but we don't really notice going from 4K to 8K. And we certainly don't really notice going 8K to 360K. So it isn't very useful. So you want a model for dealing with reality that is granular enough to arrive at the desired location, but simple enough not to be, overwhelming, because words do tend to be somewhat lineal. It takes time. If you experience a moment in a second, and then a writer will often take that moment and slow it down so that one moment of the perfect kiss or whatever takes 3 pages. It doesn't, and then reading that's a 15-minute kiss. In fact, it was a moment that's been parsed down through language to help the reader relate to it. But if it's a 28-hour kiss, you're still reading about the little bit of skin on the upper lip that, well, it's too much. For whom? Too much for whom? Is it too much for life? No, it's too much for the culted, brainwashed, cult-structured minds that we have been given. The cult says, get on with it. Do something else. Keep moving. Be productive. You spent 27 hours studying a kiss. I mean, that's not normal. Do something like we're all doing. And so we come into this domain where beliefs are not real, but they're a model of reality. And so what's a useful design for a set of beliefs? So, for example, we take the thought, feeling, body triangle. Now, we believe that we have thoughts, and we believe that the thoughts are separate from the feelings, and we believe that the feelings are separate from the actions. I feel like killing you, but I'm not going to do it. I have this feeling, but it's separate from my actions. Now, at some level, that's nonsense. At some level, actions generated the feelings, thoughts generated the feelings, and feelings generate all action. And thinking is a lighter form of action, and physically engaging is a denser form of action. Is it real? No. Is it useful? Yes. It's useful to say all of that. If you learn something that helps your life improve, then it's a useful belief, even though it's not real. So here's what we want to look at is some models for understanding the model of reality that is belief. So one of the things to understand is that models of reality exist on a continuum. Now, the continuum is usefulness, complexity, symmetry. So usefulness, complexity, symmetry. Another useful, so let's write that. Now, this isn't true either, by the way. Writing on a glass screen here. So we've got these continuums. Now, another useful kind of point on the continuum is ahead of reality, ahead or behind. So, let's look at these things. So let's say you have the belief people are good. Is that useful? It's probably a little bit more useful than people are bad. But that depends on the situation. If you are in a highly scarce environment with high degrees of trauma, then believing that people are bad is probably a little bit more useful than believing that people are good. Why? Because in scarce and traumatic environments, the reptilian brain is highly activated by the majority of people in that environment. Reptilian environments, sociopathic environments, traumatic environments, induce the traumatic reptilian brain in those people and animals in that environment. Your dog may be a lovely, lovable fellow, but if you whip that dog, if you subject that dog to attack from multiple larger dogs, if the dog rolls over on its back and rather than accepting the surrender and backing off, you put boiling hot water on the belly of that dog while it's in that surrender posture, then it's going to navigate through fight, flight, and freeze. And if it gets a chance, it's going to start lashing out at the sociopathic reptiles that are behaving so sociopathically. And in that environment, saying, oh, my dog is a lovely fellow, he would never hurt me, you are dysfunctional, meaning your model of reality isn't fitting reality. On the other hand, if you're in a generally empathic environment. Now, an empathic environment is one in which the person in the most pain is getting the most attention. If you go into a hospital that is sociopathic, the surgeon will be doing a breast implant for a billionaire while a child is bleeding to death with a leg that's been severed. Because in a reptilian framework, that child may be dead or alive, but the billionaire is going to provide the funding for the doctor's next Lamborghini. And so billionaire breast implant, kid bleeding to death who doesn't have any money. In a reptilian environment, the people who have the most and need the least get the most attention. So that's a lot of our cult. Bill Gates isn't in great, jeopardy of dying anytime soon, or can't, not being able to afford his medical bill and all that. But if Bill Gates wants to get a bank loan, for example, he just picks up the phone, says, transfer me money. They recognize his voice. They don't ask him for his password. Oh, nice to talk to you, Bill. He has a special banking relationship. They move the money over, etc. But if Joe, who's homeless on the street and actually can't afford toothpaste, picks up the phone and says, my teeth are rotting. I want some toothpaste. Banker, can you get me a loan? They say, well, come and fill in an application within these hours, of course. And so you can't even get past the address. You don't have an address. So because you really need help, we're not going to help you. Now you're in reptilian territory. You're dealing with sociopathic people operating from the reptilian brain, that the more you need help, the less help you receive. So if you're in that type of environment, the belief that people are reptilian and cruel is useful, but you may or may not want to develop a game face. In other words, you may want to believe that people are cruel, but you may still practice a smile or something. You may figure out a game face, an adaptive model to navigate the sociopathic elements of the culture. Because one of the things that's also true in a reptilian culture is reptiles do not want to feel bad about their reptilian behavior, because then they might have to change it and it wouldn't be expedient to become more empathic. Because in an empathic environment, it's the kid, the woman with the billionaire with the breast implant, if there's a scarcity of surgeons, is told, hold on, we've got to put this kid's leg together. And if the billionaire walks away in a huff, right? Oh, surgeons these days, right? I'm going to be late for when am I going to reschedule my breast implant? Oh my goodness. These poor, kids ruining our lives. The billionaire in a reptilian state may walk off in a huff, but if the kid who needs the most help gets the most help, you're dealing in an empathic world. Now, is it useful to know that? It is. It is useful to know that, because if you understand that you're dealing in a reptilian environment, then you don't go to the banker and say, I really, really need a loan. My husband is sick. We've got a $100,000 medical bill coming, and our house is going into the red because recently there's been a mortgage crash and a housing crash. And so we actually owe more money on our home. So you can see just how much we need your help, Mr. Banker. Please, can you grant us a loan? Because in a reptilian framework, the more you need, the less useful you are to a reptile, because the reptilian brain is about exploiting. And so if you're dealing with a reptile, the reptile says, oh, good, we can sell you a high-interest credit card for 25% interest. And we'll only give you, a few $1,000 because, we've worked out that's kind of the point at which you're probably not going to declare bankruptcy, even though you need to declare bankruptcy. So we'll give you a couple thousand, and we'll just make hay for our shareholders, giving the most vulnerable people, immigrants, single mothers and stuff, 25% interest rate. Because you see, we want Gates's money, but, he wants to pay 1.3% on his loan, right above, Federal Reserve levels. And he wants to get 3%. So he wants to put his money in our bank, get 3% interest. We'll loan it out at 25% to the most vulnerable. And we'll give him money he doesn't need at 1.6% interest rate. That's how reptiles play. It's called the capitalist framework. The more you don't need, the more we'll give to you. And you're dealing with that in a dating framework. If some shy, traumatized, embarrassed, poor guy without a job who feels lonely, feels depressed, has low self-esteem, and desperately wants to feel like he belongs somewhere, puts a dating profile out there and says, hey, I feel lonely. I just need a friend to talk to. Please come out and see me. I really am feeling down right now. In a reptilian cult, all the women will say, what a loser. What a loser. He needs me. I don't want a man who needs me. I want the guy who's rich, perhaps a little bit sociopathic, who women are throwing themselves at, right? I want that guy who's popular, who's going to make me look good. I don't want to care about other people. And so, you're dealing in a reptilian environment. Now, this is the, depressed loneliness environment of Facebook, because when you're in a reptilian cult, where the more you need help, the lower your rank is in prioritization by the reptilian brains who are observing you without empathy, but how to use and navigate and move within the structure. Well, then you have to look good, even though you feel like shit, to get rank. You need to convince someone else that you are rich, popular, high adrenaline, exciting, extroverted, normal, going places, well-educated, all the little rank symbols that the cult has created. You're way up at the top there, and you're a real catch. And women with low self-esteem, etc., if you then, it's called a neg in pickup circles, where you put them down a little bit so that they understand just how important you are. And then they'll, please have sex with me anytime. And I've got an important job interview, but no, I'll come over and meet you. I don't expect anything. Just fuck me without a condom. Of course, you're really important. And so, you're in a sociopathic environment when that's the way people are behaving. And there is a lot of that behavior. And so you want to have truths, even though they're lies. You want to have truths, you want to have beliefs that help you understand patterns of behavior effectively enough to make decisions. Now, here's a really important thing about models of belief. We talked about complexity. So a simple one is this a good person or a bad person? Well, that's probably useful. If one person is going around macheteing people and chopping off limbs, and the other person is going around passing out wheat for bread making, well, good and bad is adequate for that. But when you deal with one person is highly competitive and, will really go all out to try and win an argument, and one person isn't interested in thinking at all, let alone winning an argument, it's like, I don't want to think about that. Good and bad isn't useful, is it, as a model for your belief? Is this person good or bad? It's not useful. This person is competitive. Is competition good or bad? Well, doesn't it depend on the rules, and doesn't it depend on the outcome? If you're competing to fuck the most people in a way that leaves them feeling like shit and makes you gain rank as a machismo male, if you're competing in that game, what if you're competing instead to plant more trees? There's a leaderboard around Mr. Beast's tree planting project. So Mr. Beast, popular YouTuber, of course, has hacked a lot of these systems. So he's a predator, right? In a sociopathic system, you want to be a wolf or something. So he's hacked into that. If you're in a reptilian paradigm, you want to be alpha, right? So Mr. Beast, the alpha in a reptilian paradigm. Well, there's all kinds of little games and sub-games going on in the cult that establish rank. But one of them is, alpha, predators type symbols who then have a soft side. He's not so bad, And so anyway, Mr. Beast, aside from giving away millions of dollars and blowing up swimming pools and tormenting, various people and entertaining them and playing power dynamics so that the cult can realize the game the cult plays, Mr. Beast has also decided to plant 20 million trees. And in the leaderboard of who's planted the most trees, there's little competitions. And, one billionaire will, Elon Musk planted 1 million trees. So, there's other people that want to be associated with high rank. Musk did this, Buffett did this, so I'm going to do that too. Because you've got rank through association. And so if you're going to compete with something, why not in a situation of increased weather volatility compete around who's going to plant the most trees? And so, and what's the purpose of a leaderboard? To give the score. Trump tried very hard to fiddle and raise his asset prices to get higher on the Forbes 400 list. Why? Because in a cult where money is more valuable than people, and all you have to do if you want to see whether people or money are more valuable is, you offer 100 Americans $100, or you offer them a homeless person who by definition is poor. If you offer them a billionaire, you say, do you want to meet a billionaire or do you want to have $100? Well, they'll pick the billionaire. But if you say, do you want to meet a homeless person who by definition, the one thing you can know about a homeless people is they don't have enough money for a house. Or you want $100? Well, I'll take the 100 because it's money is more important than human beings. as a status symbol. It's a little bit convoluted because a status symbol to who? To people. I want to look good. And you look good the higher you climb in the ultimate scoreboard. The ultimate scoreboard is not baseball. It's the Forbes 400 list. We don't track the kindest 400 people in the country. We do not track the most competent 400 parents in the country. We do not track any of the feminine traits, such as the most emotionally literate 400 people in America, or the 400 best lovers in America. I mean, useful things. What we do is we track the 400 people with the richest amount of net assets in their bank account. That's the holy grail of the American cult is to climb that ladder. So of course, when Trump's doing his taxes, he doesn't, if you're trying to climb the ladder, you don't want to pay taxes, but you do want to get higher on the list. And so, Trump would inflate his assets to climb up higher. No, I have at least $4 billion because this property is worth this. But then, go around to the IRS and say, no, it's hard. This property is losing money. It's not worth anything. I couldn't give it away. But so, I don't want to pay any taxes on it. But no. This property is really valuable. Put me higher on the list. So we get into one of the next areas of the models we use to see reality through beliefs, and it's symmetry. Obviously, you don't have a very useful model if the building is worth nothing in Trump's model when he's dealing with the IRS, but it's worth billions when he's discussing his net worth with the Forbes 400 people, right? You don't have symmetry. So if you're trying to engage with reality through a model of reality, you want something that's solid. One of the best ways, in one of the Solomon fables, where two women are saying, it's my baby, Solomon said he'd cut the baby in half and give them both, half. And one woman said, fine. And the other woman said, no, let the other woman have it. And he gave the baby to the mother, understanding that an empathic mother would never choose to be right if she really truly loved, that baby at the risk of that child's life. That someone who instead wanted to take something or out of envy see that someone else didn't have it. Envy will destroy whatever it is that they don't have, rather than do what's necessary to create that for oneself. Envy often begins with the belief that I can't do it. I could never be that way. Now, here's where we look at the destructive aspect of beliefs. I could never be popular like you. I hate you. I want to destroy your life. I want your popularity, but I believe I can't do it. I could never be liked like you. I believe I can't. And so it hurts me. I'm in pain. Separation from and longing for. I'm in pain. I want this that you have, but I believe I can never have it. Every time I see you, it hurts. You are a reminder of the gap between where I want to be and where I am. I don't want to feel that pain, but I cannot heal the pain. I cannot move through the pain to create that I want. But I can destroy it in you. I can see that if I don't get it, nobody's going to get it. And I believe I can do that. I believe I can destroy your happiness. I do not believe I can be happy. Well, this is, where we're dealing with complexity, symmetry, usefulness, or ahead and behind reality. Now, is it useful to destroy someone else's happiness, etc., in this model? Is it useful to say I could never have it? Well, here's where you come into this dimension of, is the belief ahead of reality or is reality ahead of the belief? Now, there's a nice metaphor that looks at this nuance of the usefulness of beliefs, and it's the elephant story. Because a baby elephant, when it weighs 300 or 400 pounds, if they're in a logging or a tourist company, if they're in if the elephant is being used commercially, then a rope is tied around the baby elephant's leg shortly after birth, and the rope is tied to a post. And of course, no animal, no life form wants to be imprisoned. So the baby elephant kicks and bites and thrashes. But the more it does that, the more its leg hurts. The rope cuts in and it really hurts. And what the elephant learns, the baby elephant learns, is that fighting the oppressor, fighting the prison, doesn't do any good. It's hopeless. It's pointless to fight the system. The only consequence that comes from rocking the boat, protesting, bringing it up, kicking, fighting, is I get hurt and I get tired. And I don't want to be hurt and tired. So I'm not going to fight the system. I'm not going to kick the rope. Now, this is learned helplessness. It's an important psychological discovery, which we're doing a little bit of psychological research these days, and this is one of the fruits of that. This is, it's perfectly obvious for anyone with eyes for thousands of years, but we now have a word for it, an official word, learned helplessness, and so there it is. The elephant will not kick the rope. Is it a good belief? Is that useful to the baby elephant? And the answer is yes. It's very useful. Why? Because if that elephant just keeps kicking and kicking and kicking and kicking, it will die before it gets free of the rope. Why? Because the rope reality is stronger than the belief. The belief motivates the hope. Maybe I'm going to get through it. Maybe I'm going to get through it. Maybe today. Maybe the rope's weakened overnight. Maybe God's answered my prayers. I'm going to kick the rope again. Oh, maybe now. Maybe it's just one more thing, I'm going to kick it again. Oh, and again. And eventually, the leg needs amputation, blood, the loss of blood, the lack of sleep. Maybe the elephant just gets so sick they are shot by the same sociopathic brain that tied them up in the first place. So we're not talking about highly empathic situations of, imprisoning animals and stuff. So, if it's in a, are you useful for me commercially or not paradigm, and maybe the tourists feel guilty if the baby elephant is keeping kicking. Oh, that poor elephant. If he's given up on freedom, then maybe the zookeeper or whatever can get away with the narrative, oh, he's fine. He enjoys it here. We just, tied the rope around the elephant for no particular reason. He's having a great time. Don't worry about him. This is normal. It's kind of hard to believe if his leg is bleeding and he's, kicking and all that. So he's probably bad for business. They'll just take him out in the back, 40 and shoot him and get on with the sensible elements that, agree to their particular form of imprisonment. Now, in this dynamic now, you've got the learned helplessness, the belief of the baby elephant, it's pointless, they stop kicking. And it's useful. It saves their life. Because the belief that it is useful lines up with the data at that stage of reality. Here's the problem, though, in psychology. It's one of the biggest problems in every cult on the planet today, in every person. It's one of the biggest problems that you and I deal with. Here's the problem. That little baby elephant gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But the captors do not change the rope. They don't need to. They rely on the memory. It's actually more useful if they put a brand new big rope, then the baby elephant, then now the big elephant may think, oh, this is a new thing, let's try this. But if they keep the exact same rope, then the trauma of constantly kicking that rope as the elephant gets bigger and bigger, the trauma will be remembered. The body associates kicking that rope with near death. And so they don't. Now, at a certain point, as the elephant is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, but the rope is staying the same, at a certain point, the elephant's strength overcomes the resistance of the rope. The elephant now weighs 4,000, 6,000 pounds. The rope is still weighted at 400 pounds. A 400-pound kick would have broken it as an infant. They just didn't have more than about 150 pounds of kick when they were newly born or 1 year old. But one kick of a 6,000-pound elephant will snap the rope and lead them to freedom. But they won't kick the rope. Unless there's a fire, unless there's a new trauma that threatens them more than anything that's ever threatened them before, they won't kick the rope. Because they believe. They're not dealing with reality, in other words. They're dealing with a system of belief. They believe that it's pointless and only brings suffering. So you can see that the belief that keeps you alive in one state as you grow ultimately becomes not your savior, but your prison. The asset that helps you go from survival to security, and maybe from security to love and belonging, may hinder your self-esteem in your development of your hierarchy of needs. The investment strategy that gets you your first dollar, your first $10, your first $100, may stand in the way of you becoming a billionaire. Meaning if you learn that I have to shine shoes and I get $1, and I shine shoes and I get $1, and I got $100, I'm just going to shine shoes for the rest of my life. And of course, living expenses being what they are, I make $100, I shine 100 shoes, I spend 100 shoes. In fact, housing prices are going up. I may have to get out of credit card debt, get out a credit card, to pay my expenses and my rent and stuff. I'm just going to shine shoes harder and harder. That same thing that got you the first dollar becomes the prison. The prison. I just have to go, I have to work harder. I have to work harder. I don't want to stop doing this. This is how I made my first dollar. So at that point, you see, let's express it, this way. So this is the rope. This is the rope, 400 pounds. This is you over here. Infancy, adolescence, you're growing. Maybe you fell into the water at 4 years old and you're nearly drowned. You never want to get near water again. You look at that little wave and it's like, oh, you remember it through the eyes of a 2-year-old. That's what the elephant does. And so you're coming along. Now, the point at which the belief goes from asset to liability is the 400-pound point. Maybe a little bit more, So when you keep growing and now you can kick 500 pounds, 600 pounds, 700 pounds, 800 pounds. You see, the very moment that you outgrow your real limitations, but limit yourself because of your believed limitations, that is your prison. That's when your survival model of reality becomes the most dangerous enemy on the planet today. And you treat it like your best friend. Why? Because it's familiar. Because it's familiar. Now that's problematic too. Familiar, family. You see, the statistics are clear. If you want to know who is most likely to molest you, rape your children, steal from you, beat you, lie to you, betray you, hurt you in any way imaginable, the statistics are clear. The vast majority of abuse comes from family. Past family and chosen family. Close family and friends are 3 times more likely to hurt you than a stranger. But what do families tell their children? Don't talk to strangers. Why? Because they're safe, right? They're 3 times less likely to hurt you. Only trust who? The people who are 3 times more likely to hurt you. I'm your family. You're 3 times more threatening statistically than that guy across the street I've never met. Why the hell shouldn't I talk to him? You know, it might lead to an ally when you need a safe call to know a safe person to go to. And so, you know, these beliefs become prisons. They become highly dangerous as prisons. And it's right at that point where you could do more, but aren't doing more because you believe you can't do more. That's your prison. Now, this is why the paradigm of understanding that beliefs are not true, they're a model that either helps us engage with reality, which is far more complex than the beliefs that we can generate. You know, somewhere along the line of trying to explain the atomic patterns in a single finger, so that you can then describe how those atoms are going to relate to the atomic pattern in a single ear. Somewhere in the 23-hour mark of trying to explain just what this is and how its pretense of separation from everything else is real, you lose consciousness. You lose computing power. You don't have the RAM inside to process the reality of the complexity that reality is. You don't have it. You get lost. And so a finger, that'll do. Touched an ear, that'll do. You know what I'm talking about enough to follow along. I do, even though it's not real. This line here is what is so important. There is a gradient of belief. I can do it, I can't do it. That's on an endless gradient. You know, 2,000 years ago, if you approached a farmer and said, I can press this button on this device and ask what the weather will be tomorrow. You want to see me? I'll say, you talk to God? You say, well, Google. Anyway, watch this. What will be the weather? See, you see this? This and then. It can't be done. You must be, no, it can't be done. Now, let's imagine that the farmer has a vision of the future, and says, you know what? It's possible that there could be little devices that are powered by other little devices that are linked with other little devices and things and put together with lots of little things and linked with stuff in outer space, even though we don't know what that is yet. It's out there somewhere. And there will be communication, and we'll be able to, and the thing will talk and say, tomorrow it will be 68% raining. May be wrong, but it'll still, give you its best opinion. It's not a useful belief 2,000 years ago. If you believe you can make something like that out of dirt and iron and let's go to the blacksmith and hammer one of these things. You see the vision, it looked about that size. So it's, I don't know what it was inside of it. It had a glass thing. You want some glue on it? Glass little plate? Yeah, that's it. We're getting closer. You see, your belief is too far ahead of the reality. And so the belief can destroy your life. There are plenty of people who have died penniless, lonely, frustrated, desperate, and crazy because they misjudged the distance between what they believed in, that's neither true or false, and where reality was in relationship with that belief. They misjudged it. It happened two or three times later. I mean, if Leonardo da Vinci had obsessed as much, about flying and stuff as the Wright brothers did. See, Leonardo believed in the flying contraption. The Wright brothers believed in the flying contraption. You see, but the Wright brothers had a combustion engine. Leonardo didn't. And so Leonardo was right, but if he had obsessed with that, it was so far ahead by hundreds of years that it would have brought vast amounts of unnecessary suffering and not been a useful belief. Now, the Wright brothers were also met with doubt, with humiliation, with an endless amount of, what's the point? Even if, you can lift off the ground for a few hundred feet, what's the point? We can just walk over there. We'll drive there faster in our cars. It's expensive, wind in your face. Oh, it's ridiculous, right? Well, they were at the point where their belief put them at the cutting edge. They were right at the edge of their actual ability. And so they gave birth to the aviation industry. If you believe that you know what you're doing, you're a great parent. Of course, you've never received an hour of competent parental training, but you're a great parent. You just have to get some kids. They'll learn to respect you, etc. If you believe that and hold on to that belief in the face of schizophrenia, in the face of trauma, in the face of divorce and hatred, you eventually go insane, or you let go of the faulty belief, the belief that isn't working. But if you believe that you know how to make toast, you believe that, and then you believe that, and you make toast, and you believe that you know how to talk English, and so you do that, and you believe that you know how to stick a penis in a vagina, and you do that. And you believe that you can teach a child to walk, and you study and talk, and you can incrementally build in the direction of being a better and better parent. If you will take bite-sized pieces, if you believe I can walk to the pyramids, well, if you give yourself 10 years, depending on where you're starting from, and if you get yourself in shape, you can move towards the belief. A useful belief is a belief that allows you to develop more power. What is power? The ability and willingness to act. If you do not have the willingness to act, you have no power. If you do not have the ability to act, you have no power. You're handcuffed. You don't know how to open the handcuff. You're chained to a wall. Somebody says, run. You don't have the ability. You may have, I'd love to get out of here. I don't have the ability. I don't have any power in this context. You learn to pick a padlock. You learn to, get your guards to think you're going to the bathroom. You learn to lie, whatever it is. You learn these things. Now I have the ability to run. You don't have an ability to run faster than a bullet, so believing I can escape when there are armed guards in daylight may be a little bit too far ahead of reality. And so you can kind of see that, reality is right here, and a good belief points you in the direction of where to go. It's a little bit ahead of reality, but not so far ahead that it drives you insane or sets you up for failure. It's just a little bit ahead, and so you develop your abilities to catch up with your belief. This is how evolution occurs. You believe something is possible before it's there. It's not very hard for people today to believe that flying is possible. It was hard at the time of the Wright brothers. Going back to our sociopathic bankers, loan us some money. This is starting a whole new freedom of movement for the entire species. Please, we just need $2,000 for plane parts. No, it's too risky. We're here to make money on things that we know are sure things. We're not here to help the species, etc. We're bankers. And so, in this dynamic, it's not, but they believed anyway. They found enough friends, they worked on it, etc. They believed and gave birth to the aviation industry. And so there's this, at any given point, you have a certain ability, a certain amount of power that is technical. It's real. Your body can punch 200 pounds if you hit a punching bag and measure it. You can kick a soccer ball, 50 meters, 20 meters, whatever it is, you can do that. That's where you are now.